Hey gang, Ronin here. Welcome on back to the Cade. It's Sunday, and that means it's again time for Suckerpunch Sunday, where we wind back the clock and visit a classic fighting platform-based game from the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th generation. And for this week, we're going to go back to 1987 and the venerable Nintendo Entertainment System, and we're going to play a game that I remember reading about in the pages of the official Nintendo Player's Guide, which I still have to this day, but have never played. And we're going to do Russian Attack. Russian Attack is a game that its reputation definitely precedes itself. It was originally released for the Famicom system in Japan in 1985 under the title of Green Beret. When it was ported over to the NES in 1987, by Konami, they updated it, changed the name, and actually changed a couple things that we will go into as we play this out over the next half an hour or so. So how this game works is fairly straightforward. As you get your mission statement here, we have to go through and find the enemy's secret weapon. We're never told who the enemy is, but the game's called Russian Attack. I'm trusting you can put two and two together. Now, I'm going to pause this here really quick just so I can go over the basics with you. So in this game, you start out with just having a knife. That is your primary weapon. You never lose it, but you don't get a firearm like you do in most conventional fighting games or platform games. You will pick up special weapons on each level as you go. There are 4 levels in this game. Each one gets progressively more difficult as you go, and that's part of the reputation of this game in that for 1987 standards, this was a hard game. This was like Dark Souls hard, as I understand it, before Dark Souls. Quick plug, by the way, vote on the poll question community page. Do you want me to see me play Dark Souls Remastered? Carry on, yes or no. Anyway, you are able to jump, you're able to climb ladders, and as you go through the levels, your B button is your attack, and then A is for your specialty if you manage to pick one up. There is no timer on each level, which is helpful because, like most games of the time, they did set timers like you would see in Super Mario Brothers or other games like this. Up is jump, but if you get touched once, like I did right there, you're dead. You have no life gauge. And you only get 4 attempts to get through the game per go. So this is very much a game built on pattern recognition, on anticipation, and really on being tactical in your approach. Now, this yellow guy who's here gives me a special weapon, which is, in this case, the bazooka. I only get 3 shots with it, so it behooves me to not use it if I don't have to. Now, these blinking things are landmines. You obviously don't want to step on any of them. Now, this red guy is a karate soldier. He will jump in the air and kick you, and it is all about getting the timing to take him out. Now, you can use the specialty weapon if you got it, but like right there, he jump kicked me and that was it. So now I lose the bazooka, and I gotta get through all of this again without having it. But I remember seeing all sorts of stuff in this. Oop! And I jumped at the wrong time, and actually I climbed the ladder instead of trying to jump. So you got to think about that too, of where you're planning your jumps. But again, reading about this game in the Nintendo Player's Guide, I was thinking, man, this would be a cool game to play. And over 35 years, I never tried it. And in no small part because, as you can see, it's not an easy game. You know, by modern standards, if this was a game that came out now, your guy would have a lot more weapons. they'd have a lot better ability to anticipate enemies. You definitely would have a life bar. And just like that, it's game over. So, I'm not expecting to be able to beat this, which is why I wanted to do it for a Suckerpunch Sunday as opposed to a one-day build, or a one-day playthrough, I should say, which is a segment I'm going to be bringing back starting this week. So keep an eye out for that, where we will be having a one-day playthrough of a game that will be premiering tomorrow. Also, we will have WTF Wednesday coming back as well. But in terms of reception for this game, the NES version was really highly ranked. It got an 83% by Computer and Video Games, and the Games Machine UK gave it an 81%. The Commodore 64 version was ranked 34 out of 40 and got 4 out of 5 stars by Ace Magazine. But the ZX Spectrum version, which was a version that never came out in the States, was pretty much the highest ranked. It got 88% by Crash Magazine, 34 out of 40 by Computer and Video Games, and then 9 out of 10 by Sinclair Magazine, which was obviously the one that plugged the ZX Spectrum since they were the manufacturers of that console. Now, I like, in terms of graphics, I like the way it is mapped out. It's easy to understand who's coming from where and how everything is presented. Because they're having to do it in 8 bits, you are having to be a bit more careful in terms of figuring out what your... there we go. Took the red soldier out that way. I jumped at the wrong time. But I do like the presentation of this, in that we've got the very much the Cold War aesthetic that they were looking for in this game. There we go. And like most games that have a high difficulty curve, the payoff comes in really understanding how to get the timing down and how to be able to move between different enemies, taking them out, and knowing what you need to do to reach the end of the level. And right there, I should have been thinking about it and used the bazooka while I had it. But I can also see how this would be a game that would put a lot of gamers off, because it is fairly ruthless. Like I said, one shot and it's game over. Oh, I can't get the bazooka. Or if I go this way, there we go. But the way the graphics are done in this is very much Konami's bread and butter from this era, which was a reason why games like Russian Attack and Castlevania and that sort were really so well respected. I was going the wrong way. So I've got to get through those 4 red soldiers to end the level. But because I was jumping the wrong way, I didn't get a chance to take them out. I will say also that the music in this game isn't bad either. Alright, let's try this again. Now, I have never played this with 2 players. But I'm assuming it would be much more of a co-op sort of a game. Alright, let's see if we can get through this first level. It was funny because I was speaking with my sister last night, and she's very much a gamer who has enjoyed watching me play many a game over many a year. And when I mentioned to her that I was playing Russian Attack, her eyes lit up and she was like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah." And we got into an interesting conversation about how modern games are built on stuff that is laid out by games like Russian Attack. And the example that you came up with was Metal Slug. And how people assume that Metal Slug is a Contra clone. And there are a lot of elements of Contra in it. You get different weapon selections, you get different enemies, and it is very much a bullet hell run and gun type of game. And I love Metal Slug, by the way. That is a game that we will be highlighting on this channel at some point soon. You can bank on that because it's an SNK Neo-Geo game. But there are also elements from Russian Attack that you can take into a game like Metal Gear as well, or Metal Slug. Did we just finally take this together? Oh, we didn't. Hey, we actually got through the level. But the original design for Russian Attack, when it was still listed as Green Beret, was rather than going and destroying a doomsday weapon, you had to go and take, you had to go rescue hostages that were captured in enemy camps, which is very much an element that is in Metal Slug. So, it's not necessarily trying to reinvent the wheel, but it's modern game designers learning... Whoops. I got hit by a sniper. Learning and understanding that there were elements of great games in the past that can be incorporated into modern games and help give it a bit of a retro-style twist. Which to me seems like a fairly smart idea. It's not a bad way of going about it. Now, where is that sniper? As soon as he fires, I gotta move. Ah! Alright, come on. Ah! Didn't get the knife out in time. Now, you can get extra guys in this game once you hit certain point levels. Like, I hit 30,000, and that gave me an extra guy. So I think if I can get to 50,000, I'll get another one, and I'll get another one at 70,000. But this game also reminds me of a PlayStation game that I really liked. It was made by Square and didn't get nearly as much run as, say, the Final Fantasy games that came out at the same time, or Saga Frontier, or games like that, and it's called Einhander. And if you know that title, you know exactly where I'm getting at, because Einhander is a scrolling bullet hell game where it's more like Raiden and classic games like that, where you have to navigate through a complete and no, I don't. Thank you. Give me that bazooka. Shot it the wrong way. But Einhander consists of 5 levels. And there was always an urban myth surrounding that game when it came out that if, and remember this was still in the early days of the internet, where if you could prove that you beat Einhander, that you could send like a screen cap of it to Square and you got put on a special website, which nowadays sounds much more nefarious than it did back when we were far more naive to the sort of things you would find on the internet. But hopefully you get what I mean. So we'll give this one more go here. But now that we've gotten through the first level, and I'm starting to get the patterns down a little bit better, hopefully we can do that again here. Ah! I did not mean to take that specialty soldier out because I wanted to be able to get another bazooka. Now I just have to wait for these guys to come to me. And this isn't much different from a rare, and again, didn't jump at the right time, NES game, and I mean rare in terms of the company that made it, not that it is a hard game to find, called Kung Fu. And Kung Fu is a game that you're better served letting the enemies come to you than being aggressive and going right at them. Now I gotta take these guys out without having a bazooka. It was easier to do the first time when I could take out the first wave with the bazooka. And you have to create enough separation between you and the other soldiers coming at you. Ah! Tried to jump, and I didn't jump. It's not what I wanted. Okay. Let's see if we can't. Finally take these guys down and get to the next level. Alright. Alright, set the alarm off and jump and stab. Ah! Still tried to jump and I couldn't do it. Now, that also adds to the potential frustration in this game, because I'm playing this on an Xbox One controller that's plugged into my PC. So in terms of response time and ability to get movement done pretty easily, by comparison to an old NES controller, this thing is light years ahead on that front. But it's still not easy. So it's a matter of getting the rhythm and the timing down of the controls and making sure you can consistently execute when you need to. So let's try again here. Okay, got that one. Ah! Turn the wrong way. Dag nabbit. Which is not something I think I've ever said on this channel before, and I don't know if I'm ever going to say it again. But if I want to avoid a content strike, you choose your expletives carefully. But But if you go back 35 years and understand how more rudimentary things like video game controllers were, and that's not to say that the NES was bad. To this day, the NES still has one of the best functional controllers I ever played on, because you have to... totally whiffed on that. Alright, we got about 10 minutes left. Let's try one more time. But, by comparison to what we had played before with joysticks and for the old Atari 2600 that were real stiff and unresponsive and had no give to them, I remember playing on the Intellivision, which was the first video game console I ever had, and it was a dial with a keypad connected to it, and not a good dial either. It was like it was a disc that you could maneuver people with, and it was so clunky. But back then, nobody really knew how to create a really viable multi-function controller until Nintendo developed the Famicom and then upgraded that to the NES. And you ask anybody who grew up playing the NES, and it truly was a paradigm shift. And it was from that basic template that Sega and every other console that's come along since then has just expanded on it. Man, they come at you from different angles, and if you don't get the timing just right, you're meat. But hopefully you can tell in my voice that it's a game that I can... If I was a lot younger and playing this game, I'd be getting a lot more frustrated now. Now that I'm older, and I think I've gotten more of an appreciation for how games of the 8-bit era and the 16-bit era weren't necessarily made to be harder. They were just... The challenge was baked in. And if there is one thing that I have noticed in playing modern games, it is that difficulty spike is a lot more gradual. Like, I played Final Fantasy 16 and beat it a couple of weeks ago, and I really liked that game. It was a lot of fun. And it was easy to see where the difficulty spikes were coming, but the game also provided enough of a cushion to compensate for those spikes that, yes, it was challenging, and yes, you may have to go through a battle a couple of times, but ultimately, you were spared of having to deal with the worst aspect of what you would find in most games, which is something I know is common in, like, Dark Souls. Ah! And I had one more guy, and I just missed him. It's also something that I found in, not specifically platform games, but also in things like driving games. Like, I love Gran Turismo. I have every version of Gran Turismo that's been made, and I've been playing Gran Turismo 7 for a while. I will say that one thing I noticed, especially when we got to about Gran Turismo 4, 5, and 6, especially, was the need to, if you really, really, really wanted to unlock the best parts of that game, you had to go and get a driving wheel. Playing with the controller was very, very limiting. And you could get away with it on the early Gran Turismo games, but by the time the PS2 era came around, it pretty much made it where you didn't have an option. If you really wanted to enjoy those games to the best of your ability, you had to go and shell out the money to get a wheel. And wheels aren't cheap. So it was, okay, do you want to spend $500 to justify being able to play a game that you otherwise might be only able to play 30 to 40% of because of how difficult it is? Alright. Come on. Whew, we jumped that one guy. Okay, I'm good with that. Hey, we got through it. Nice! First target overcome. Now, to be honest, I would have liked to have been able to do that about 10 minutes ago, because we got about 5 minutes left in what I had scheduled for this playthrough. So, well, we'll see if we can get through this level. Ah! And immediately you get sloppy. The amount of concentration you have to put into this game is a lot higher than you would think for a game of this type. And I think because it comes in so bare bones. Again, if this game was made now, then your character would be armed to the teeth. And I know that because it's not much different than what I remember playing Metal Gear. And I do mean Metal Gear as opposed to Metal Slug. Because in Metal Gear, which again is another Konami title, it was all about picking up equipment as you go. And Metal Gear came out a year after this on the NES, by the way. Now, as far as I know, based on my research, Hideo Kojima had nothing to do with this game. And I think if he had... Really? Okay, well, actually that works just fine. So, I ended up getting killed by the Special Trooper, but that's it. So, that, everybody, in a nutshell, is Russian Attack / Green Beret for the NES from 1987. Now, let's go over the usual particulars, shall we? Is this a good game? I would say yes. Surprisingly so. Again, I like the presentation of it. I like the design of the game. I like the way you get the different coloration, the aesthetic of it, of being, you're behind enemy lines, you're trying to deal and end a Cold War era conflict. It's very much in that vein. And for me, as a kid of the 80s, that's right up my street. It's an easy game to play, but it's a hard game to master. And I think I've demonstrated that quite well. Is it a difficult game? Yes. That you can only take one hit. You have very limited weaponry. And you've got to be able to understand and anticipate and be very, very good at pattern recognition and anticipation of where your enemies are going to be and what you need to do to take them down. It is a game that I think mirrors a lot of games we look at today and think are more difficult than they should be. Now, is this a game that I think could be made today? Yeah, I do. I genuinely do. I think it wouldn't be hard to come up with a concept like this, but would it have the same elements in it? No. I think it would very much be a case of you would have more weapons available to you. Would it be a first-person shooter? Probably. If they could do it as more of a 2D or a 3D game, you could do it as a sandbox. I could see you putting more missions in here than just the 4 levels. But would that necessarily make it a better game? Your options could vary. You be the judge, our lines are open. But is it a game that I think you should try? Absolutely. I think if you're looking for a challenging game from the 8-bit generation, it is very much one that I can, now that I've played it, I understand the appeal. I understand why it had the reputation it had back in the day. And I think it's one that if you can get all the way through it, if you can master all 4 levels and finish it, I do think it's a game that you will walk away with a genuine sense of accomplishment, which is rare in video games, especially nowadays. you know, back then, especially the 8-bit generation, it was if you, like, I remember when the first time I beat Legend of Zelda, like, that was a big deal. Which may seem silly because it's a video game, but whatever. You know, when you're a kid, it is when you finally understand you have the capacity to beat a game that not many people can get through. So give it a try. Yeah, again, I play this on the Mesen, M-E-S-E-N emulator, which is a free emulator. It's not hard to find. And if you don't want to play it there, again, there's a million different variations of this game that came out on the Atari, the Commodore, the Famicom. The Game Boy Advance has a version of it. The MSX has a version of it. They re-released it on the Nintendo DS. It's on the Switch. So it's even on Xbox 360. So, you know, if you try it, let me know what you think. Leave down in the comments below. But in the meantime, hope you've enjoyed this edition of Sucker Punch Sunday. Again, we will be bringing back our one-day playthroughs starting tomorrow. They won't be happening all the time, but it's something that I've been putting off, and I want to get back into that. We will also have an episode of WTF Wednesday that's coming up this week, and we will have Sports Saturday and Sucker Punch Sunday again next weekend. I do have plans for my next playthrough. I'm getting those finalized, but I also, again, want to get some more content out of the way before I dive back into those playthroughs because they are fairly labor-intensive. Also, be sure to vote on the poll question. Do you want to see me, a 40-something-year-old first-generation gamer, finally dive into the Soulsborne universe and take on Dark Souls Remastered? Leave it down in the comments below, yes or no. Pretty easy, or rather cast your vote on the community page. And as we get closer to 200 episodes on this channel, it's one where I will think about if I want to do that to mark that dubious number. So, in the meantime, as always, my name is Ronin. It's been great to spend this Sucker Punch Sunday with you. Be safe, be well, happy gaming, and we will talk to you again soon as we will bring you our one-day playthrough and WTF Wednesday. Bye!